If you can identify the supply and demand flip zones, you'll be able to capture the best trading opportunities. To make consistent profits in the market, you need to be able to identify and trade with the smart money. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you how you can identify these supply and demand flip zones and how you can use them to make money in the markets. Okay, so in today's video, I'm going to be talking about supply and demand flip zones. This is one of the more advanced concepts I'm going to be talking about, but I'm going to be simplifying it today so you guys can use these supply and demand flip zones in your day-to-day trading. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about what are supply and demand flip zones, how to identify and draw them, some things to look out for when identifying and drawing your supply and demand flip zones, as well as, of course, the last part being how to combine them with the break and retest. I trade the supply and demand flip zones a little bit more differently than how most people trade them. I'm going to break down exactly what I'm looking for when trading the supply and demand flip zones. So let's get into it. The first thing that we're going to be talking about for the supply and demand flip zones is that we're going to be looking for key areas on the chart where supply turns into demand and vice versa, right? So supply turns into demand or demand turns into supply. So you can see right here, we have a line illustration on the chart and that we're clearly in a mini uptrend, right? We're consistently making higher highs and higher lows. You can see in this case, right, we have what's called our demand zone. So you can see price is holding the bottom of the demand zone. And then we end up having our break of structure right here and we have our push towards the upside. So as we see price comes back into this original demand zone, you can see the price ends up breaking structure towards the downside. You can see we come back into now what's called a supply. So we have our original demand on the left-hand side and now what we have is our supply zone on the right-hand side. So we have that break of structure right here. We come back into this level and now this area should act as supply for a push towards the downside, as you can see right here. So supply and demand is very similar to support and resistance, right? We use these concepts in combination with one another, but supply and demand are areas of support and resistance instead of actual key levels. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. How can we use these supply and demand flip zones in our day-to-day trading? So what do these supply and demand flip zones look like on a chart? So you can see we're on my first example here and we're going to be talking about supply turning into demand. So you can see right here we have identified our flip zone. So this was our original supply zone, right? I'll talk about how to identify and draw them in a second here. You can see once we get below this, we end up using as a retest towards the downside. We end up coming back into the bottom of the supply zone, rejecting this area, pushing towards the downside. As you can see in this case once more, tap into this area once more, pushes down, and then we get back inside to the top of our supply zone. You can see we end up rejecting this area and then pushing back towards the downside. You can see we tapped into this area once again, one more, and then another time right here. And you can see right at the end, this is where we finally have that large leg of displacement. We finally have our break above this supply zone. And now this area can be used as a retest. And you can see we have that push back towards the upside. So this is a classic example of what's called your supply turn into demand or your flip zone. Next on the chart, now we're going to be talking about demand turning into supply. So you can see in this case, right, the way we drew this demand zone was that there are multiple touches. You can see right here, we drew out our large box. You can see this was our area of demand. You can see there's a big touch here. We touch it once more again. We have another touch as well. So multiple touches, the better. You want to look for at least 2 to 3 touches when creating these supply and demand zones. So now you can see we have that break of structure towards the downside. So now what you want to see is this demand zone turn into supply. So you can see price ends up coming back into this area. We end up touching this original demand zone, now turning into supply. You can see we're rejecting this area and that's why we have that push towards the downside. So in this case, this is a classic example of demand turn into supply. So when looking at these levels are interchangeable, right? Demand turns into supply, supply turns into demand. It's very similar to support and resistance, right? Support turns into resistance, resistance turns into support. But the main thing about demand and supply is that it's a key area on a chart and not just a key level. Next thing we're going to be talking about is how we can use these supply and demand flip zones in combination with my bread and butter strategy, which is the break and retest. So you can see in this case, what we have is our flip zone drawed out. You can see this was our original supply zone. You can see we tap it here, we tap it here, we have that push towards the downside. So you can see right here, we get back into our supply zone. We end up having displacement towards the upside. You can see price ends up returning back into our now supply zone, turn into demand. You can see we tap this level very nicely, and that's why we have that push towards the upside. So if you're looking at it from this perspective, you can clearly see that this flip zone was used as a break and retest. We originally had our break and retest towards the downside right here. Once we got back above that level, you can see this level used as support for a push back towards the upside. You can see once we have this leg towards the upside, we end up using this level as a break and retest back towards the upside. So you can see this supply and demand zone was used as a break and retest towards the downside and towards the upside as well. So this is a classic example of how you can use the break and retest in combination with your supply and demand flip zones. So these are just some of the key things to look out for when identifying your key flip zones. The first thing you want to have is multiple touches. This means you want to at least have 2 to 3 touches on the higher time frames. The time frame to draw these key flip zones are on the 1 hour time frame and above. You also want to look for multiple confluences as well, where you have multiple touches. You also have multiple key levels coinciding with your key flip zones as well. That's when you have the best high probability flip zones. Other things to look out for is strong displacement. Whenever you want to see supply turn into demand or demand turn into supply, what you want is strong displacement. You want to see a strong break above your demand zone or below your demand zone, and then you want to see a retest of that level to confirm that flip to either side. So you want to have strong displacement, and then lastly, what you want to have is a shift in order flow. A shift in order flow essentially means that we have a market structure shift or a potential break of structure where now the order flow changes from bearish to bullish or bullish to bearish, and we start trending in either direction. So these are the main things to look out for when identifying and trading these flip zones. And now I'm going to be going on to some examples that I have for us today. So before I get onto my examples today, I want to talk about how to identify and draw these flip zones. As I talked about, you want to start off on the higher time frames, and you want to have what's called multiple confluences and multiple touches. So you can see this is a great example to start off of on trying to identify your key flip zones. The first thing you want to be doing is going on to the higher time frames. Currently, we're on the weekly time frame on AMD. The main thing you want to do is mark out key levels. So you mark out your key level, which is your all-time highs all the way back from November, and now you want to go on to the lower time frames. So you understand that we have this previous all-time highs level. Now what you want to do is go out and mark out your key flip zones. So we can use this level right here and mark out there's multiple touches right around this level. You can see we can mark this out right here. As you can see, this is a great example of a potential flip zone. You can see right here, once we break above, we end up using this as a retest. 1 touch here, 2 touch, 3 touch, 4 touch, right? Price has a big push towards the upside. As you can see right here, we touch it once more. You can see once we got below, we end up using this as supply back towards the downside. Now price is kind of just consolidating in this area, and now we're underneath it and we're trying to use this as supply back towards the downside. So this is a classic example of your previous demand zone now turning into a supply zone. So as you can see, right, we had original demand now turning into supply towards the downside. So with this being said, let's go on to some examples that I have for us today and how we can use this to trade intraday. Okay, so you can see we're on my first example here, and this is on the Apple daily time frame. And the first thing we're going to be marking out is key levels. So you can see right here on the daily time frame, we're going to be marking out this key level because this was our previous resistance area and now turned into support. The other areas we're going to have marked out as well is this key resistance area that is currently having, right? You can see it's currently trying to reject off this area. So these are a couple flip zones that we're going to be looking for. Of course, we also have your all-time highs level towards the upside. So now we're going to be going on to the lower time frames. So you can see now we're on the 1 hour time frame, and we're going to be marking out our key levels. So you can see right here, this is what's called our flip zone. So you can see right here, this is our supply zone, right? Price tried getting above this area, but we never ended up getting above it in the actual hours, right? This is the pre-market, and you can see we end up failing towards the downside. We start using this area as supply. You can see there's multiple touches here. So what we're going to be looking for is a potential break above this supply zone, and then look for this retest for a push towards that all-time highs level on Apple. So we can play the tape here. As you can see right now, currently, you can see this flip zone, right? We use this as resistance. And now we're getting above this area, so we're going to see if this area can be used as support for a push back towards the upside. So now we head on to the lower time frames here. So right here, we're coming into market open here. We're going to be marking out key levels in combination with our flip zone, right? We're going to mark out your previous day high level. So you can see this is your previous day high. It's also in combination with your key flip zone as well. You can see we're now above this key flip zone, so we want to use this level as support for push back towards the upside. So if we go into the 1 minute time frame here, so now coming into market open, we have all our key levels marked off, right? We have our key flip zone on the higher time frame. We also marked out our previous day high. So we want to see the reaction of this level coming into market open. So you can see price opens here and we end up tapping into our key flip zone and our previous day high. And you can see that price is respecting this level. You can see price is respecting our previous day high. It's respecting the top of the flip zone as well. And we're not even having a candle closure inside of our key flip zone. So this signals to me that price is very much bullish, and now we're going to wait for our bullish confirmation. You can see right here, price ends up respecting our level. That's our signal to get in after this bullish candle. And now we're going to be looking to enter in our position with stops just a break below our flip zone, and our targets in this case is going to be on the higher time frames. So you can see their first target is going to be our pre-market high, and our second levels is going to be back over here, which is a key pivot high from a couple days earlier. And now we're going to drag this out, and this is going to be our trade thesis for the day. As we play the tape here, you can see price comes up to our first profit target. We would have scaled a little bit there, but we would have been leaving them for the main target, which is our key level on the higher time frames. As we play the tape here, you can see price ends up tapping into our key order block, and now we're expecting a push towards the upside. As you can see, price ended up tapping into our top of our key level very nicely. We had a very nice reaction off of our flip zone, also coincides with our previous day high as well, for a very nice push towards the upside. So let's go on to the next example that I have for us today. So you can see we're on my next example here, and this is on NVDA on the higher time frames. And you can see when we're looking to draw our key flip zones, you want to look for the areas with the most confluences and most touches towards the upside. So this is the area that I have drawn out. You can see we have multiple touches here. This was used as demand. You can see we end up using it as supply right here. We end up getting above it. No real displacement towards the upside. We end up breaking back below, using this as supply for a push towards the downside. You can see right here, use this as supply once more. You can see now price is pushing back up to the top of our flip zone. And now what we can do is go on to the lower time frames. So you can see right here on the previous day, we have a very strong push into our flip zone. You can see we end up tapping the top of this flip zone, and in the pre-market, we end up getting above this area. So now we want to use the supply level as demand for a continuation towards the upside. So right now you can see we're on the lower time frames. The areas we're going to have marked out is your pre-market high. We're also going to mark out your top of your flip zone, which also coincides with your previous day high as well. And we're going to see the reaction around the top of your flip zone in combination with your previous day high as well. So as we play the tape here, you can see coming into market open, right, price taps into our key flip zone, right, and it's also tapping into our pre-market high as well. So what we're going to be doing is waiting for a potential break above this level for a push towards the upside. So you can see right here, we end up having our confirmation candle. We end up tapping into the top of the flip zone. You can see we have buyers stepping in. We also tap into our previous day high level, and we have a push towards the upside. And that's where we're going to be looking to take entries after that confirmation candle, with stops just to break below your opening candle low. And in this case, we're going to be targeting our higher time frame levels. As you can see in this case, we're going to be looking for this key pivot high, and we're also going to look for this key pivot high as well. And now we're going to go back onto the lower time frames. And you can see this is a 2-to-1 risk to reward ratio trade. And now we're going to wait for price to play out. And you can see right there, price had a very strong push off our flip zone, right? This also coincide with a previous day high retest. This also coincide with an opening drive play straight towards our key profit area, which is our 90.85 level on the higher time frames. And with that being said, let's go into the final example that I have for us today. So you can see we're on my final example, and this is on the Tesla chart. You can see we're on the daily time frame, and the areas we're going to be marking out is key areas with multiple touches. So you can see in this case, this is our first key flip zone that we have. have. You can see this area was used as support, turned into resistance, got back above it, tried using it as support here, got below it, used it as resistance, and now it's just kind of consolidating around this level and using this as resistance towards the downside. So this is our major key flip zone on the daily chart, and we can draw out another key flip zone. As you can see, the range is getting a little bit tighter here. So we can draw out this key flip zone towards the downside as well. So we have our flip zone towards the top side, which should act as supply, and we have the bottom, which should act as demand towards the downside. And now let's go on to the lower time frames. You can see right here on Tesla, we have a very tight range between demand and supply. You can see we're really bouncing in between these ranges, right? Using this low as demand, using the top as supply, and we're bouncing in between these ranges. So whenever this is the case, what we want to do is look for a potential range break and use these areas as flip zones. So you can see right here as we play the tape out, as you can see, price ends up coming and tapping our low all the way back here. After this breakdown on Tesla, we're going to be looking for two potential trade scenarios. We're going to be looking for this level to be used as potential resistance for a pushback towards the downside, or what we're going to be looking for is a potential reclaim of this level and use this as support for a move back towards this upside. So as I talked about, these levels can be used as support and resistance, or supply and demand, and these levels are interchangeable. So that means you can use them as resistance, you can use them as support. These are key institutional levels where big players are looking to facilitate their orders. So now we're going to play out the tape. So you can see here, price is now coming back into our flip zone, and there's two scenarios that price can do. We can either reject off this area and push towards the downside, or we can reclaim this level and push back towards the upside. Either way, we're going to be looking for a trade opportunity. So let's go on to the lower time frames. So you can see we're on the lower time frames here as market opens, and let's play out the tape. So you can see price is now pushing into our flip zone. So you want to see if price potentially can reject this area, or we're going to break above it, use this as a retest for a move towards the upside. So you can see that price is currently trying to reject the top of this flip zone, but you can see this wasn't really a strong confirmation candle. You want to see if price can either have a next leg towards the downside and break structure, or we're going to have that next leg towards the upside. Now you can see we're above our flip zone. Now what we want to do is use this area as support for a push back towards the upside. So you can see price is now tapping into our order block on the 5-minute, which also coincides with our flip zone on the lower time frames as well. So now we can head on to the 1-minute time frame. So now you can see price is now tapping pre-market high perfectly, which is the bottom of the flip zone as well. So now we'll wait for an extra confirmation candle for moves back towards the upside. So now you can see we have that confirmation candle. We're going to have stop just to break below the flip zone. First target is going to be high of day, and now we're going to go back onto the higher time frames to look for targets. You can see in this case, the next target we can mark out is this key pivot high. We can mark out this key pivot high all the way back towards the upside. You can just mark out key targets, right? You can mark out key targets. You go back onto the 1-minute time frame. We can just extend it back towards the upside, and this is the trade that we're going to have. So we play the tape here. You can see price tapped into our first profit target. That's where we're going to be looking to scale. You can see we end up using this as a nice break and retest back towards the upside. See price tapped into our second profit target and our third profit target as well right here. So as you can see, this was my final trade towards the upside, and you can see these flip zones are used very nicely in combination with the break and retest. So I hope you guys did enjoy that video. If you did, make sure to drop me a like and sub, and I'll see you guys next week for a brand new video. Peace.